Hey guys, Jason here, Master Jace, Jason Jeffries, the Alliance Project, the Rebel Alliance, whatever you call it, whatever you know by. Today we're going to be talking about lost Anunnaki technology. So, find a good place to start. There's lots of hidden knowledges and knowledge that's been lost through man through the ages. Um, so we're going to talk about ancient lost technology, and until we looked at the source of what that technology is or what it may be, or when you start looking at the source of the technology and what it possibly was and what we can prove it is and how powerful and amazing it was, you got to start going back and saying, well, where's this technology exist? Where does it actually come from? Do we still have this knowledge today, or have we somehow been lost? Is it out there in the ether somewhere, or can we tap into it? You start to realize it's a much bigger story than just, oh, well, here's some proof ancient advanced technology, and here's a stone gun, and here's some rocks, and it's not how the ancients worked. We're only starting to realize that today. Their level of doing things and engineering and architecture was so different from the way we operate today, and on a daily basis, basically. That's the trap we find ourselves in, basically. The real scientific realities that we face is we need to deal with, where does this beautiful planet of ours come from? Where does the universe come from? In the same sense, we get told in the beginning there was nothing, and then suddenly out of nothing, everything in existence appeared. And it's hard to wrap your mind around or even say that makes sense. Scientists call it the Big Bang. And religion and spiritual people call it God or Creator. In that moment, that split second, you walk into a very definite science and God dilemma. And the exciting thing is that when you read between the lines, it's the same thing. It's just a misunderstanding of language or misinterpretation of words. What's really going on out there? Ones don't want to talk to each other. They both argue with each other, and things get put in a box, and it's just becomes a mess. It's basically compartmentalization of knowledge in a control system that's created divide and conquer. The same principle we all suffer from, the illusion of separation. So scientists tell us out of this nothing, suddenly everything appears. Came flying out of this thing called the Big Bang, and it remains a theory, a really well-backed theory. And if we look at some of the ancient texts, it tells us more about that. It gets into a greater depth of, for consciousness had to exist. All these superpowers had to exist, but for it to exist and move, it had to create something for itself to move in pertaining to. That's where the 7-day theory comes in. A lot of academics tell you this is fact and this is that. Sorry, I had to upload a video. What's fascinating is when you start looking at the universe and everything in it, it starts to look like a giant living organism, and you realize it truly is a giant living organism. Living, breathing, existing, filled with consciousness. Looking very much like the parts of our brain and our anatomy. This is the living universe that we're looking at, and it becomes spectacular. It's very interesting that we talk about evidence of an expanding universe. The universe, or the multiverse, because there are many, there's very few scientists that actually believe there's one universe. I actually think that there's an infinite number of multiverses. And it's expanding and growing and growing. And in the case of the standard Newtonian physics and science that gets shoved down our throats, we get told that that's not possible because you can't create or destroy energy. It's just always exists. Well, let's take it back to the moment of the Big Bang and realize we have a problem. You can't create or destroy energy. Well, where did it all come from? Where did it come from if you can't create it? If there's no beginning, then where do we start? if you keep sticking to the Newtonian physics and stuff, you're going to get in real deep trouble, basically. So it's very important that we step out of that box and out of that way of thinking, and realize that the moment you embrace like multidimensional physics and the new frontier science, the new frontier of knowledge that crosses all boundaries of knowledge, that does not compartmentalize information, you're going to continue bumping your head against things until you can accept that as a whole. The problem with like this expanding multiverse is that we find ourselves in is, according to basic normal physics, there's got to be something blowing it up, something expanding without something contracting, and clearly there's no evidence for that going on. This is a huge problem because we find the laws of Newtonian physics break down on a quantum level, and things are not as they seem. Becomes the most exciting part of this journey of discovery, this journey of life. We start recognizing the source of this advanced technology that we keep talking about. And this ancient advanced times, this ancient advanced technology keeps coming to the back of the source of all things. It's not some magical thing. We just don't understand these fundamental principles that are super far removed from our the science and physics that we're taught. We're getting onto a new pathway with that though nowadays. We just got to start understanding that we are a part of an infinite fractal of energies and just multiplication of these of creations, if you will, and consciousness. And through consciousness and multidimensional physics, we start to read and talk about and learn, and we start to come to the realization of the facts that have been hidden to us for so long. We're coming to the part where we can almost scientifically understand spirituality and consciousness, and it's really exciting when you think about it. But ancient technology is about understanding the source code, basically, of what this ancient technology is all about. And it's all about sound and resonance, okay? All the ancient cultures talk about it. You can't get away from it. You can't try to find anything else because it'll always bring you back to this. Everything in creation comes from this sound source or this resonance. The creator brought everything forth in this prime resonance frequency that holds everything together in this perfect harmony. So it's coherent. It's the principle of everything that exists in harmony. It's a very important lesson for us, for us as human beings, for how to coexist with this resonant harmony, if you will, like the Schumann resonance. And these advanced technologies of the past, to really comprehend it, we have to think outside of the box, It's almost like Star Trek when you talk about the prime directive. There's no identification of self or mission, no interference with social development of a planet, and no references to space or the fact that there are other worlds or other civilizations. That's like the prime directive. There's no going against this prime resonance, this prime frequency that everything flowers out of. Now, for the people that are open-minded enough to think that there's some advanced beings, that spiritual beings that are here from other dimensions and things that are actually trying to help us along our path, there's some incredible evidence to go along with that. I actually shared FBI papers in a recent video that talks about this, right from the FBI database and website. Read it word for word. You guys could go back to that video. It's really fascinating. A lot of boring reading, but in the parts that I highlight and read twice, it's amazing. But they kind of that would be breaching the prime directive from Star Trek though if they did. But if it's the idea that we're supposed to expand and grow in our own consciousness and not be interfered, but apparently there was an interference, something that happened that changed us, that made us fall, kind of falling away, that made us lose our memories and all this knowledge to a point that it was almost unnatural. So they had to come back and build us back up to where we were to help us complete this cycle, you know, to help us in this, with this growth of consciousness, and reunite us with source, you know. But when you start looking at the numbers that has to do with these resonance and principles of, you know, the universe, you start realizing there's patterns. There's three is a big part of it. It's like the Holy Trinity, you know. It's a very interesting example. Music and sound and harmonics. It's something you can start to understand really easily. When you add the third note to the first two notes, you get a complete chord. It becomes a beautiful, harmonious chord, you know. But if you don't do that, you don't get the same effect if you add something else. But you got to add the third note, you know, to complete the chord, if you will. It's like Tesla said, 3, 6, and 9, you know, the mysteries of the universe. And music itself can make you, you know, have empathy and make you change your emotions. You can feel happy, sad, you know, nervous, malice, all of these different things just from music and frequency and resonation. And when you realize you can polarize yourself, polarize your brain by just thinking of the opposite or thinking of what you want to feel like, it actually creates it. You can manifest it. So when you start to understand like these resonant harmonic octaves, the seventh note is the eighth note from the source, basically. And the eighth note is the octave above the seventh note in front of it, or the note in front of it. So there's like a dimensional aspect, you know, these harmonic resonance principles. And then that's how you can start to understand these advanced technologies. And when you start thinking about monatomic gold and what it actually does in terms of like advanced technology and your DNA and your body and how it can be used, you start to realize that 7 kind of hide 8. You know, if you look at like a star tetrahedron or a hexagon, you pretty much see the same things. It's like a 2D version of the other. If you look at a hexagon, 7 and 8 are actually the dot in the middle. You know, one hides the other. So if you were to turn it and twist it, you'd see 7 and 8. You see what I mean? The dot in the center in a 2-dimensional picture. But if you twisted it, it would hide 8. So there's the dimensional aspect. It's the best way to put it. Like draw, you know, these hexagons or these star tetrahedrons or these sacred geometry with the flower of life and things like that. Metatron's cube. You realize it's a 2-dimensional shape, but if you twist it, you can see the other dimensions of it. Just 7 hides 8, basically. You can see in there. There's like encoded basically the harmonic resonant principle. Basically, if you don't have like a real well-trained ear, you can play the middle C on a piano and then play the C above it in the octave, and you can close your eyes. You're not knowing if you're playing 2 notes or 3 notes, or if it sounds, you know, it sounds like 1 note basically. The 7th frequency hides the 8th, below or above it. And that's how musical scales work. You start understanding a lot more about resonance then, and dimensions, and, you know, chakras even. You know, 12 and 13 are just a higher level version of the 7 and 8, you know. And then if you consider 22 over 7 is like an approximation of pi, it's very close. It's not perfect, but it's an approximation. Then you start to realize that there's something encoding in that ratio, you know. You start to realize that this is just a few important lessons about understanding why the universe rings like a bell and vibrates in perfect, coherent harmony, you know. and understanding that our bodies do this. And it gives us a really clear indication that we are like in resonance with the universe. We're like an infinite fractal of this creation. If we resonate in perfect harmony with everything in creation, and we don't become diseased and things like that, it's because we're in harmony with the universe and harmony with our planet, you know. And it's has to do with our genetic fields and, you know, everything like that. Within the, if you go back to the previous lessons, I talk about biofeedback and how, you know, it has to do a lot with harmonics and fractals. And the more you like start to harmonize, the more you can connect to this morphogenic field, you know. And you can look up William Brown's presentation on genetics, Dan Winter's presentation, and you can start understanding more about the morphogenetic field and resonance, and behind everything is because it's all connected. You can't separate anything from everything else. That's the problem we face today, is like everything is compartmentalized and we become so separate and segregated that we can't understand things as a whole or a big picture and how it all interconnects. And basically because of this like resonance that's encoded in us, we're infinite fractals of this resonant field. And from the prime creation, the prime source, the prime frequency, and we all have like this sphere of influence around us. And that's like why people can say like, oh, I feel a bad vibe, or a bad vibe in the room. I have a bad feeling about this. And we use this in our language all the time. You know, we have a bad vibe. It's talking about vibration, frequency, and everything. And people don't realize that on the simplest note, that that is the key to everything, you know. If you look up Greg Braden, you'll notice that the fact that measurements and science was done on the heart compared to the brain, and it actually shows that your heart is in as much as 5,000 times stronger than the frequencies of your heart, or of your 5,000 times more stronger than the brain. Sorry, and the source of your heartbeat, in fact, is from your brain. You know, it's a trigger, but it creates a magnetic field around you. And when you create a magnetic field and a shift in this magnetic field, you're creating electrical current. And when you look at how the heart was wrapped, braided, and the different layers, I think there's 5 or 7 layers of muscle tissue and fiber in there. It actually creates a vortex effect within the blood. And we know the blood's a conductor, and everything around it. It's all part of emotion. You know, your emotional state, your spiritual state, your well-being has a lot to do with how you feel, and how you feel has a lot to do with how you create this magnetic field, and how it interacts with your DNA, and it chooses which parts of the DNA to read, like a line code in a computer program. You know, you got to do certain things, or it's going to read the code. It's not going to read the whole code all the time. And once you start to realize that, then you start to realize that spiritual, mental, and physical health are all connected in this triad, this holy trinity. So if the heart's the thing that keeps pumping, and it's a frequency of like 72 beats a minute or whatever it is right now, it depends on how fit you are or how you feel, your heartbeat, it's has to do with your connectedness to source. It's what it is. It reminds you that you're a divine being connected to the source. Every time you hear your heartbeat, or next time you feel depressed, or you want to fucking cut your wrist or anything like that, you should feel your heart and know you're connected to everything around you. And this spectacular realization is like, it's amazing. Just remember, you can control your emotions, not let them control you. You can control your body and not let it control you. You can use all these things. But let's get back into the idea of sound and resonance and these ancient advanced Anunnaki technology, right? Sound is the primordial source of all things, and then we should be able to do everything with sound, essentially, especially advanced technology. You know, blowing things up, levitation, whatever you want to do. Growing things, healing people. Egypt had healing technologies where, depending on the frequency of your body and the illness you were suffering from, you'd stand on these different platforms at different points, and different frequencies would go through your body, and it would help heal you. It would help keep people living longer. There's a couple researchers that's actually boiled water with sound and levitated things with sound, even broke metal or made it warp into other things. I believe that you can completely manifest things with sound if you had the right frequency. Pull things out of the ether and essentially manifest the unmanifested. So I'll give you a couple examples of what sound can do. It can levitate things. It can boil water. It can create light, create DNA. It heals. It can destroy pathogens. It can move beyond the speed of light no matter what you're told, and can make things invisible. Sound is light. Vibration is everything. So if this sound, this induction rate, is almost instantaneous reaction over a distance. So it actually moves faster than light, okay? Because it's an induction rate. It is the thing that causes everything. It is the source. This vibration, this frequency is source. Just because you can't hear it doesn't mean it's not sound. Can make things invisible. It can energize water, energize air, create a gravity and electromagnetism, everything. You want to learn more about sound traveling beyond the speed of light, look into Sazer technology, Sazer, I believe. And also it's known as hypersound. You know, if you want to take it to a religious sense, God said, let there be light. So the sound created the light, right? So basically it manifests everything in this electromagnetic universe that we live in. You want to learn more about, like I said, sound traveling faster than the speed of light, you can look up that in 2005 at the Middle Tennessee State University, 2 high school students and 2 undergraduates demonstrated basically that sound traveled or moved beyond the speed of light. It's published in the American Institute of Physics, and it should have made it news all over the world, but it might be the first time you're hearing about it from. But if it's too dangerous of an idea, it can give people too many ideas and help us climb out of this matrix of illusion that we live in. That right there is exactly how we're being controlled and compartmentalized, basically. So what I'm going to do is share with you some sound experiments with this little project, and hope you guys enjoy it. And we're just going to kind of cut it off there, and then we'll pick back up. This will probably be a 2-part project because I have a couple things to do today, and I hope you guys enjoy it.
The film you're about to see has no characters. If you spare a little of your imagination, it is a film to describe to you the effect of cymatic frequencies on matter. Everything owes its existence solely and completely to sound.
So if you guys like that little part, I'm going to see if I can pull up the papers for that experiment again. Okay, so I found the paperwork. I'm going to go ahead and read it to you. A group of high school and college teachers and students have transmitted sound pulses faster than light travels, at least according to one of the understandings of the speed of light. The results conform to Einstein's theory of relativity, so don't expect this research to lead sound-propelled spaceships that fly faster than light. Still, the work could help us spur the research that helps boost the speed of electrical and other signals faster and higher than before. Standard metric for the speed of light is that of a traveling in a vacuum is constant, known as c, and is roughly 186,000 miles per second, or roughly 1 million times the speed of sound in the air. According to Einstein's work, matter and signals cannot travel faster than c. However, physicist William Robertson at Middle Tennessee State University of Murfreesboro, along with a high school teacher, 2 college students, and 2 high school students, managed to, depending on how you look at it, transmit sounds faster than C using more than a plastic plumbing pipe and a computer sound card. This experiment is truly basement science. Key to understanding their results is report online on January 2nd in the journal Applied Physics Letters, and is envisioning every pulse of sound and light as a group of intermingled waves. This pulse rises and falls with energy over space and with peak strength in the middle. In an unrelated previous experiment, Robert Boyd at the University of Rochester uses similar principles to make pulses of light travel backward and faster than C. Robertson and his colleagues transmitted sound pulses from the sound card through a loop from PVC plumbing and connectors from a hardware store. These loops split up and then recombined tiny waves, making each pulse. This led to a curious result. When looking at the pulse that entered and then exited the one pipe before the peak of entering the pulse even got into the pipe, the peak of the exiting pulse had already left the pipe. If the velocities of each of the waves making up the sound pulse in this setup are taken together, the group of velocity, then pulse C is exceeded. I believe that is one of the first experimental demonstrations of sound going faster than light. The loop filter that we use splits, then recombines sound along two unequal paths. Such split path interference occurs frequently in the everyday world. When a sound source is located near a hard wall or something, some sound reaches the listener directly from the source, whereas sound travels the longer path and bounces off the sound of the wall. The sound recombined at the listener. However, the weakness of the signals and the fact that any result differences in the timing are very slight mean that we could never be able to hear this effect. None of the individual waves making up the sound pulses travel faster than C. In other words, Einstein's theory of relativity was not preserved. This means that one could not, for instance, shout a message faster than light. Still, this research might have the engineering applications. Robertson explained that although it is not possible to send information faster than light, it seems these techniques could make it possible to route slower than light signals in electronic circuits faster than before. And if you look into what are known as Birkeland currents, you can see that they travel way faster than light and actually could what would be called instantaneous reaction over distance, meaning it sends information, meaning one part of the universe could communicate with another part of the universe because it's almost instantaneous and is believed to be called partially the cause of the northern lights and things like that. I'm going to have to stop this recording right here, take a pause, and then share more with you guys later because I got to get ready and take my son to a Halloween parade and things like that. But I will be making a part 2 of this. I will get updated and I will get into the ancient lost technology and things like that. So I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Please watch, click, like, subscribe, share, comment, do whatever you can. Support the channel in any way you mean to. You don't have to do it financially, but at least do it somehow, some way. And I appreciate everything you guys do. Thanks for being a part of this.